Do you feel like there's a door in your proverbial life that's trying to shut and you are with all of your strength trying to keep it open, even though maybe you can sense that God is calling you to something else?
Yeah, you've got that door stop in there just so it will not close. When a door is closing, God opens a window or a new door.
But sometimes it can be really confusing to know when we should pivot, when we should quit. What is God calling us to do? How do we know when God is calling us to close a door so that we can move on to something better that He has for us?
So let's dive into this topic a little bit, and we're going to share some examples of when quitting is actually a good thing. Okay, so Casey and I used to own a coffee shop and a little bistro, and we loved it. It was a lot of hard work, a lot of good coffee, and we met so many wonderful people. It was like we put our heart and soul into this coffee shop business, but we knew that a change was coming. And so how do you let go of something that's a good thing? We want to talk a little bit about some of the signs that come up within us when we know that maybe there's a change coming. You know, one of the things I think first off is that you kind of have this lack of clarity.
Yeah, big time.
You're like,
should I? Shouldn't
Yeah.
I? Should I? Shouldn't I? What will happen if I do this? What won't happen?
and you can see reasons to keep going and you can see reasons to change. So what's the right decision and how do you make a big decision like that? Because that, for us, was a huge decision.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things I think that we have struggled with in different times in our business when we have these difficult decisions to make about knowing, like, where is God leading us? Sometimes it's confusing. Sometimes we do lack that clarity. And one of the things that we have often had to take a step back from and go, are we trying to please other people by making the decision that we're making? Are we worried about the staff that we're going to let down as we sell this coffee shop? Are we worried about the customers who will be disappointed? Are we worried about, all of these other things that ultimately we can think about them as we work forward through a decision, but those can't be the reasons why we make a decision.
That's right. And in that whole turmoil, you can see both sides.
Mm-hmm.
And you just don't know which side is weighing, heavier. And so I know that when we were struggling with selling the coffee shop, we thought about all those things. We thought about our customers because we had good relationships with them and we didn't want to lose that. We had good staff-employee relationships and we didn't want to lose that and let them down. But in the end, we had to do what we knew God was calling us to do.
Mm-hmm. And not worry about pleasing people, because we need to worry about God's plans for our life, because God's in control of their life too. That's the thing that we have to remember. We can't make our decisions based on pleasing other people. We have to make our decisions based on where we feel that God is leading us. And sometimes that's a really, really hard decision.
And also, God doesn't mind whether you're working in the coffee shop or working on another business. But I'm going to say there's a difference between like good things and God things.
Mm-hmm.
Because the coffee shop was a good thing and God blessed us in that business. But it was time for us to pivot and time for us to have a shift. God was calling us to a different area of work in our lives, and we had to realize that God was showing us signs, and lack of clarity was actually one of them.
Mm-hmm. Another one of the big signs that you can look for in your life if you feel like God is trying to get your attention to maybe help you shift directions to something else is this. Maybe you have been putting so much energy, so much attention, so much, like you've put your heart and soul into this thing, and it's not growing or prospering or doing what it should be doing, despite all of your efforts.
And despite all of your prayers, because
Mm-hmm.
you're asking God to bless you as you move forward, doing it for Him.
Mm-hmm. And, again, like we just said, it's not that it's a bad thing, but maybe that's a sign that God is saying to you, I want your energy going somewhere else because I am going to bless and prosper this other thing. And blessing and prospering something doesn't just mean financial. That's not at all what we're talking about.
That's right.
But if something is like a drain on you versus if it's energizing to you. And so maybe you've been putting so much energy and attention and focus and all of your heart and soul into this thing, and you're just starting to feel burnt out because it's not progressing the way that you intended for it to progress.
And burnout is something that you don't want to get to.
Mm-hmm.
When you're at burnout stage, you've gone a little bit too far. It's a little over the top. And so make sure that whatever if you're facing a decision where you maybe need to pivot, ask yourself, are you feeling burned out? Are you feeling like overexhausted? The things that used to energize you are not energizing you anymore. Mm-hmm. That's a real sign that you're getting a little burnt out.
Mm-hmm. And all of these signs, you might be feeling burnt out in your situation. That doesn't mean necessarily in and of itself that it's time to pivot. It's just a sign that when you feel maybe like God is saying, okay, it's time to shift direction, that's one of the signs that might be pointing you to the fact that God is trying to open a different path for you.
That's right. Or maybe it's just time for a rest season for you.
Mm-hmm.
Because not always is he asking you to shift. You have to kind of search and do some real reflection on you and God together, because even Jesus went alone in the garden to pray. And so maybe it's time that you have a little rest period where you are going to the garden alone to be with Jesus and find out what he really is asking you to do.
Mm-hmm. Which kind of leads us into one of the other signs that maybe it's time to pivot or shift, and that is conviction. Mm-hmm. Often, I think this is kind of the most important one, because all of these other signs, if you don't have conviction on top of it, then it's probably not a sign, right? Like, we have to kind of put them all together and then feel and have that conviction from the Holy Spirit that God is saying it's time to shift, right? And so you've got to pray, and you've got to actually take the time to listen. Mm-hmm. And we often don't do that, especially when we're busy, but we need to really take the time to hear what God is saying to us. Pray about it, read the Bible.
And one of our favorite verses for this is Psalm 119, verse 105, where it says, "Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my soul." God is going to direct you in the right way, in the right path. He wants you to be doing his purpose, your God-given purpose. And so we have different seasons in our life. Just because now might be a time to change doesn't mean you were doing the wrong thing. It just means that maybe a door is closing and another one's going to open.
Mm-hmm. It might be scary to change. It might be scary to say, you know what? I'm quitting that. I'm pivoting. I'm suspending whatever the thing is. That can be scary because we don't know what's coming. We don't know where we're heading. But what we need to remember is that we don't need to know 10 steps down the road, right? God, the lamp to our feet doesn't show us a mile down the road. It shows us the next step.
And there might be twists and turns in the path, just like maybe right now where you're going to pivot and go right.
Yeah. And so we don't need to worry about what's, way down the road. In fact, the Bible tells us that if God cares about the birds, then how much more does he care about us? He's going to take care of us. And even when we don't know, even when we can't see what's coming, we can trust in the fact that he's got a plan and he's going to take care of all of those details if we put our trust in him.
So just remember that if you're struggling with something where you don't know if you should quit or not everything is a God thing. There's a lot of good things. In fact, you can be so busy doing all the good things in your church that it will lead you to burnout. Does that mean you should quit some of them? Probably. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean they're not good. God has a right plan for you, and he has a right plan for us. So let's get into the word. Let's find out what he is asking us to do, because he does want to prosper you in whatever you do.
Mm-hmm. In fact, I have heard it said recently that one of the enemy's tactics that he uses is to keep us so busy that we can't actually hear what God's plan is for our life or see it. And it can be busy doing all these good things, like maybe serving in your church, maybe it's a job, maybe it's a relationship. He keeps us so busy that we end up in burnout, that we stop listening to where God is calling us. And then that busyness, it's like we justify it because they're good things. But we live in a world where when we say yes to one thing, we're saying no to something else. And so if you think about that, every time you say yes to another activity that makes your calendar that much busy, you're saying no to more time with your family, or you're saying no to time to rest or read your Bible. You're saying no to something else, right? We say yes to one thing, which means that we say no to something else. And we have to start weighing out, what am I saying yes to and what am I saying no to?
Because your health and well-being is really important. It's really time to maybe prioritize what direction you're going. What path are you following? Because maybe you have to put some boundaries into your life and your lifestyle so that you are able to do more with your family or more for yourself, because we have to care for ourselves. The Bible calls us to love our neighbor like ourselves. So let's stop being so busy that we
neglect ourselves.
Yeah, that we can't even look after our own own self.
Yeah, because that's another big thing that happens is when we are so busy, when, maybe God is saying it's time to pivot, but we're so busy, we're not giving our bodies good nutrition, we're not sleeping enough, we're not moving our bodies, we're not taking good care of our body, mind, and soul, then that's not a good thing, right?
I know. And another sign that maybe you need to quit something is that your joy is gone.
Mm-hmm.
Joy is a big thing, and busyness can rob us of the joy. And so I urge you and I challenge you to do some self-reflection. What is it that you need to pivot on? Remember that quitting is not always a bad thing. In fact, I remember one time we had our kids in a certain school. This is a long time ago, but I remember my husband and I struggling so hard with the decision to pull the kids out of this one school and put them into another one, because in our own minds, we aren't quitters. And yet someone had to remind me that quitting is sometimes a good thing. And when we actually made the decision and we put our children in a different school, it was the best decision that we had made. Like afterwards, we could see how God was directing and leading us and guiding us on that path. But it was a struggle. It was an inner turmoil until I had to be kind of taught that sometimes quitting is okay.
Yeah. And that's kind of the final thing, that once you've made the decision, if you feel peace about it, then you can let it go, right? And if you don't feel peace about it, then you got to go back and kind of re-gauge what's happening. Having that peace that passes understanding helps us know that we are in step with the Spirit, that we are in step with where God is leading us.
So we just want to end with asking you to stop living defeated. Maybe you do need to quit something and have a rest time or whatever it is, but stop living defeated
and step into the purpose that God has for you.